All right, well, great to see everybody this morning. Glad you're here today. I am pinch hitting for Pastor Bo today. He was able to schedule his shoulder surgery for Thursday, and reports are that the surgery went well. So thank God for that. Obviously, he'll have some recovery time and some recovery to put in there and some discomfort, so we need to keep praying for him and his family. But I'm excited to be here today and really excited about this series we're in, the Follow Me series. And this really actually is the final message in the Follow Me series. But I love this whole thing because Jesus tells us to follow after him. And in fact, when he first met his inner circle and the team that he picked, the guys that would become known as the disciples, the 12 disciples, one of the first things he said to them was the simple command, follow me. Follow me. And we're learning to follow after Jesus as we value people the way he valued people, as we connect with people the way he connected with people, and serve people the way Jesus served people. Today we'll be talking about how we can influence people to know him. So an exciting day, exciting message. I'm really excited about it. I remember a few years ago, before my kids learned how to drive, I was heading home from church one evening. I had one of my boys in the car with me, and we were headed south on Chambers. And I got behind a car, and this car, he had his turn signal on. He had his left turn signal on. So I kept following behind him, waiting for him to turn, and he wasn't turning. He kept going. We went for about a mile. He's got his blinker going, and he's not turning. And I start kind of grumbling about this, and I'm going, oh, look at this guy. I mean, he doesn't know how to drive. He's driving around with his blinker on. He's not turning. My son says, really, what's the matter? I said, why is this guy out here on the road? He doesn't even know how to drive. We go for about 2 miles. He still hasn't turned, and finally, I just can't believe this guy. And my son finally speaks up and says, well, Dad, maybe you should turn your blinker off. So I had been following behind this guy with my turn signal on, complaining that he had his turn signal on. And isn't that just like life? At times, we find ourselves following behind somebody who we probably shouldn't be following, doing things that we probably shouldn't be doing. And Jesus says, follow me. So today we're going to study a passage from Matthew 5. And before I read this, I just want to kind of set the scene a little bit. This is from Matthew 5, begins in verse 13, and this is from the Sermon on the Mount. And this Sermon on the Mount was a series of messages that Jesus gave on a hillside near Capernaum, near the Sea of Galilee. And it was in the beginning of his ministry. And there's a lot of very famous teachings of Jesus came out of this sermon. The Lord's Prayer is one of the things that he talked about, the Beatitudes. And this passage here is one of the things that he talked about in the Sermon on the Mount. And before I read it today, I just want you to maybe imagine yourself there on that hill. I've seen pictures of the hill near Capernaum, and it's a grassy kind of hill. There's some rocks there, so you could go there and sit in that grass, maybe lay a blanket down, or you could sit on one of the rocks, and just picture yourself in Jesus' time. There was no television, there was no internet, no devices, football had not yet been invented. But you're hearing this buzz about this great teacher, and big crowds are gathering to go and see this guy. And you're hearing rumors that miracles are happening. You're hearing rumors that healings are taking place. And you think to yourself, you know what? We need to go see this guy. And so you gather up your family and you go to this hillside. And there are masses of people there. And there's Jesus, and he comes out, and his 12 are there with him. Others are there. And you're there, and Jesus begins to speak. And maybe as he addresses the crowd, he looks right at you. And this is what he says. Matthew 5:13. He says, let me tell you why you are here. You're here to be salt seasoning that brings out the God flavors of this earth. If you lose your saltiness, how will people taste godliness? You've lost your usefulness and will end up in the garbage. Here's another way to put it. You're here to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a city on a hill. If I make you light bearers, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? I'm putting you on a light stand. Now that I've put you there on a hilltop, on a light stand, shine. Keep open house. Be generous with your lives. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up with God, this generous Father in heaven. If you're following along on your outline this morning, that first blank to fill in, we're here to influence others to know God. Jesus is telling us what to do. We often wonder, well, what is life all about? What should I do in life? Jesus says you're here to be salt and to be light and to influence others to know Him. And I find this fascinating coming from the greatest influencer in world history, right? No one has influenced the world the way Jesus influenced the world. You can think about people like Socrates or Plato or Aristotle. These guys, by the way, all taught for about 40 or 50 years of their lifetimes. Jesus only taught in his public ministry for 3 years. We can't remember most of what those great philosophers said, if anything. But Jesus changed the world, more so than great composers like Beethoven or Bach or Bieber. Jesus changed the world because He changed hearts. He healed souls. He saved souls. He brought dead souls back to life, and Jesus still does that today. Jesus, in His time and place, put a value, a new kind of value on human life that didn't exist in that time and place in history. He put a value on women in a time and place in history when women weren't even considered citizens, let alone second-class citizens. He put a value on serving and caring for the poor when the poor were really not even valued at all in His time and place. Jesus changed world history. He was the greatest influencer of all the time. And He points at you and me and says, now I want you to influence others to know me. Now we know that Jesus wants us to influence others. How do we do it? Well, He asks us to be salt and light. Salt to bring out the God flavors. Every once in a while, my family and I, maybe once or twice a year, we'll go to Maggiano's. Anybody ever been to Maggiano's restaurant? And one of the cool things about Maggiano's is you can order family style. And what family style is, you pick whatever you want to eat, but the portion is big enough so that everyone can have a taste of it, right? So I may order lasagna, which I usually do. Cindy, I think she usually orders the chicken pesto. Max orders the fettuccine alfredo usually. Caleb orders the chicken parmesan. And it shows up, and I dig into my lasagna, and I go, oh, this is so great. Here, taste. Have a bite of my lasagna. And Max might go, wow, that's really good. Here, have some of my fettuccine alfredo. And Caleb will go, hey, let me get some of that lasagna. I'll go, here, have some. Can I have some chicken parmesan? And we all have something that we want someone else to taste because it's so awesome. The psalmist said, taste and see that God is good. And Jesus is kind of echoing that concept. That we need to, by the way we live, bring out the God flavors. John Maxwell put it this way, we are to be appetizers for God. When people see who we are and what we're all about, we want them to crave God. Also, light to show the God colors. Light to show the God colors. Check out this picture. I think we have a picture that I took last Sunday. Last Sunday was similar to this Sunday. It was pouring rain by the time people came to church. But yeah, look at that. When I got up in the morning, I headed out of my driveway, and there was a beautiful rainbow there. And I kept following it from Locust Grove, coming up here to the church last Sunday morning, and the rainbow was just there everywhere I went. And I was thinking, where does the rainbow end up? And I pull into the church. There's my angle, and this picture doesn't do it justice, but beautiful, bright colors of the rainbow arcing over the top of the church. And I happened to take that picture with my cell phone. I texted it to Bo, who was already here. He even put it on Facebook. Some of you may have seen it. But it got me thinking, what is a rainbow? How does that happen? And rainbows are really cool because what it is it brings out the bright colors that are already there in the white light that we see all the time. See, we usually just see white light, and a lot of people think of God that way, don't they? Most people would say, yeah, I believe there's a God, a kind of a light in the universe. But rainbows bring out the colors in that white light. The little raindrops in the sky form tiny prisms, and they reflect and they refract light in such a way that all of a sudden we see more than just white light. We see these bright reds and oranges and yellows and blues and greens and indigo and violet. And all of a sudden we see that there's more to it than just this white light. And God says that we need to be kind of like those little raindrops, those prisms. And we need to show people that God is more than just a white light. He is deep. He cares about us. We can experience Him in our lifetime. We can have an intimate relationship with Him if we are light to show the God colors. So we know what God wants us to do. He wants us to influence others, to know Him. But I want us to pause for just a moment before we talk about how to do that. I want to talk about who we need to influence. And that's up to you to figure that out. I want to take just a moment. See, I don't believe that God would call us to influence other people if He has not put people in our lives that need to be influenced. And so even as I'm saying this, you may be thinking of somebody, I know who that person is that God's put in my life. Or maybe you haven't thought of that person yet. I want to take 30 seconds, maybe a minute. And I'd like for us to just close our eyes and be quiet for just a minute and allow yourself to talk to God and say, Lord, bring to mind the people in my life that I need to influence to know you. And don't even pray for that person just yet. Just pray to God and just ask Him to bring those people to your mind. And I'm going to be quiet for a minute. All right, amen. If God brought somebody to your mind, raise your hand. I'm just curious. Almost everybody in here. God has somebody that He's brought into our lives because we need to influence them. I might encourage you even to write down the name of that person on your communication card. We're not going to contact that person. We're not going to contact you. But we'd love to pray for that person. We'd love to pray for you as you look for ways to influence them to know God. So feel free to write down their name on the communication card, drop it in the offering plate at the end of the service. Okay, so we know what we need to do. We need to influence others. Now we know who we need to influence. Let's take just a few minutes and talk about how we influence people. How are we salt and light? If you're following along on your outline, the first blank, first thing we need to do is think purposefully. Think purposefully. Again, those verses, let me tell you why you're here. Here's your purpose. You're here to be salt. Here's another way to put it. You're here to be light. Take a moment and just try to remember, what is the first thing you think of every morning when you wake up? If you're like me, first thing I'm thinking of is, I got to go to the bathroom. And then maybe you think, oh, okay, well, it's morning. I need to have some coffee. And then you think, well, I just had coffee. I got to go to the bathroom again. But what about your purpose? What's the first thing you think about? Maybe you think, well, what do I have to do today as an employee? What do I have to do today as an employer? What do I have to do today as a parent? What do I have to do today as a spouse? Maybe the first thing you think of when you wake up are all the things that you should be doing that you're not doing. Or maybe all the things that you wish you could do that you can't do. Maybe that's how you view Jesus, a list of do's and don'ts. Maybe you look at the Ten Commandments and you wake up and you just think, oh man, I can't worship any other gods before the one true God. What a bummer. Or maybe you think, I can't even use the Lord's name in vain today. What a bummer. Or, I can't even, thou shalt not kill. Come on. Maybe you're thinking about all that you can't do. But what I love about Jesus is he's really about all that you can do. And those 10 commandments are really supposed to be flipped around. That we can worship the one true God, where we can find satisfaction and peace and fulfillment. We can fill our mouths and our minds up with good words that can help people. We can try to bring life and give life to others instead of tearing them down and trying to take away life from others. What do you think about when you wake up in the morning? We need to think purposefully. And a lot of times it's the simple things that we do. Do you know those people that came to mind today? Do you know where they're from? Do you know where they were born? Do you know what they struggle with? I have people that I've known for 20 years and they don't know how to spell my name. I'm not bitter, but it's Glenn with 2 N's. But do you know those people? Have you taken time to find out what their needs are? Maybe what their favorite brand of coffee is and bring them a cup. Maybe a way that you can serve them or pray for them. Do we take time to wake up in the morning and think purposefully? To saturate our minds with God's word and his transformative power in our own lives so that we can introduce that to others. Second thing we need to do, number 2, is to see responsibly. If we want to be salt and light, have an influence on others, we've got to see responsibly. Listen to this verse, verse 13. If you lose your saltiness, how will people taste godliness? You've lost your usefulness and will end up in the garbage. Have you ever been there? You wake up in the middle of the night, you can't sleep, you're anxious because you think, wait a second, am I wasting my life? Am I really doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Or is my life just going to end up in the garbage somewhere? Am I living responsibly with all that God has given me? And then we have to ask the reverse question, what takes away our flavor? What makes us bland and tasteless? Well, you might want to write these down on your notes. I call them the 3 R's. One is rude living. The other is routine living. And rut living. Those things make us bland and take away our flavor. What is rude living? Well, I think a lot of times as Christians, we actually mean well, and we want to have an influence on people, but sometimes we go about it in such a way that it communicates not love, but anger, but hate, but divisiveness. Are you offering advice to people who haven't asked you for advice? Are you trying to counsel people who haven't asked you for your counsel? See, rude living is when we're trying to influence people that we really don't have a relationship with. And we come across giving them the opposite effect. I see a lot of this actually happen on social media, where really maybe important topics are out there, but the conversations start getting really weird and start getting divisive. And are you having conversations in the right time and in the right place where there is relationship? We don't want to lose our flavor or maybe add a flavor, but it's an unpleasant flavor, a bitter flavor through rude living. What about routine living? Another way to think of that is just going with the flow, conformity. Why do you work where you work? Well, that's just where they told me I should work. Why do you hang out where you hang out? Well, that's just where everybody hangs out. Why do you do what you do? Well, that's just what everybody does. It's routine living and you have no flavor, you have no saltiness. The opposite of that is what we talked about earlier, follow me. When we're following after Jesus and we're going where we know we need to go because Jesus has led us there. We're doing things that matter and connecting with the people we need to connect with because Jesus has led us there. And that's when the flavor comes back. And what about rut living? Occasionally somebody will come up to me and they'll say, I got to look for another church. And I'll say, oh, really? You're leaving us? What's going on? What's the problem? And often they'll say, well, I'm not being fed here. And I'll always think, really? That's hard for me to believe. I mean, every Sunday we have a tasty spiritual meal. We teach the Bible and we bring the scriptures out, present them to people. We have small groups that are Bible-based and Bible studies that you can sign up for. What I've learned over time is that sometimes when people say, I'm not being fed here, what they really mean is, I'm in a rut. I'm expecting you to feed me. And that's the only nourishment I ever get. The only time I ever get a spiritual meal is when I show up here and you serve me something. And it causes a rut. Our dog, Jet, he's in a rut. Eats the same thing every day, kibbles and bits. Sometimes we'll put a big bowl of kibbles and bits out there. He just walks over and sniffs it and walks away. He's in a rut. But every once in a while, and I know you shouldn't do this, but every once in a while Cindy will be cooking, and man, if there's bacon involved, Jet's tail will start wagging, he'll start drooling, he'll come over, he becomes alive. And we'll just drop a little piece of bacon down, he scarfs it up, and Jet becomes a whole new animal. He's out of the rut. He's out of the routine. Or people that love to cook for themselves. Those people never get in a rut. They love sharing their recipe with you. They love inviting you over. Hey, look what I just cooked. It's those of us who don't cook that get in a rut because we just expect you to give us something good and we're mad if you don't. We don't want to get in a spiritual rut. Take time to find out how you learn and what inspires you. Videos, reading, meeting with other people. Those are all ways that we can break out of the spiritual ruts and have spiritual meals. Not just on Sunday morning, but all throughout the week. Every morning. We need to see responsibly. We don't want to have a wasted life that's just a pile of garbage that Jesus talks about here. And number 3, we need to speak openly. Think purposefully, see responsibility, and use our words and our actions to speak openly. Look at this part of the passage, verse 14. Jesus says, God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a city on a hill. If I make you light bearers, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? I'm putting you on a light stand. Now that I've put you there on a hilltop, on a light stand, shine. And I love this phrase. You might want to underline this phrase. Keep open house. Be generous with your lives. By opening up to others, you'll prompt people to open up with God, this generous Father in heaven. Ask yourself a question this morning. Are you an open person or are you a closed person? Are you an open person? Or how many open people? Raise your hand. Are you an open person? Okay. The rest of you are closed people. Some of us think we're open people, but the things we say and the way we act makes us perceived as closed people. Some of you may know Lon Langston. My buddy, he's on the red carpet team. He shakes your hand every morning. And he does something really fascinating. He's got a company called Significance Ideation. And what he does is he helps make people more successful by studying behavioral psychology, neurology, the science of the brain, figuring out why we do what we do and what effect that has. And he came into the church staff and did some of his stuff with us, and it's really cool. I'm going to do a little test on you, all right? Turn to the person next to you and just shake their hand. Just offer them a handshake. Lon told us there's so much you can learn in a handshake. You can learn things about yourself. You can learn things about the other person whose hand you're shaking. You can learn whether or not you're an open or a closed person. For example, when it's time to shake hands, are you just standing here like this? That communicates closed. But what about this? You're extending your hand. Is your hand open? When you offer a handshake like this, what does that say? I'm giving to you. I'm open. Some people come in with the closed handshake, and it's kind of like the domineering handshake. You want a firm grip, right? You don't want like the dead fish grip, like the end of the fingers. And you don't want the opposite of the bone crusher grip, right? And what about conversationally? If I'm talking to you and you're standing there and my feet are pointed over here, what is that telling you? It's telling you I'm kind of closed. In fact, I kind of want to walk away from you. But if my feet are pointing towards you, we're engaged. I'm open. We're open to each other. Are you an open person or a closed person? The way that we interact with each other, the things that we say with our actions and our words, communicate whether or not we're open to others. I love this phrase in here, city on a hill. The bright lights of a city on a hill, because sometimes we are the hope that people need, what we say to them and how we act around them. I was thinking about a terrible airplane flight I had years ago. We've all got one of those. How many people have a bad airplane story where you thought you weren't going to make it? Yeah. This was years ago. I was in college, and I was flying from Seattle. I went to school in Washington State, and I was flying all the way back to Connecticut, where I lived at the time. And it was my first flight from Seattle to Connecticut. And I've never really been nervous about flying, but that day we were on the tarmac there at the airport, and it's just pouring rain. And there was a nice, sweet old lady next to me, and I could tell she was really super nervous, and she was kind of wringing her hands. And at one point, she leaned over, and she's like, "I'm so nervous. I have never flown on a big plane, and I'm really scared." And so I just said to her, "Hey, it's going to be okay. You know, the statistics say." I think I said it more smoothly to her. The statistics say that you're more likely to get in an auto accident than a plane accident. It's going to be okay. Don't worry. And she says, "But all this pouring rain and there's lightning out there." And I said, "Don't worry. They don't take off in that. They're going to wait till things get calm." What I didn't know is that in Seattle, things never get calm. It's always raining. And so next thing I know, we're taking off into this storm, and the rain is just coming down in sheets. And I find myself in the awkward position of trying to seem calm to her, but I'm looking out my window seat going, "Oh my gosh, I don't think we're going to make it." And so we're ascending into this storm, and I feel this sharp pain in my forearm, and I look down, and this woman has her fingernail digging into my forearm. And we're bumping up through this rainstorm, and I'm looking at her going, "That's going to be fine." And I'm looking out there going, "Oh my gosh, I don't think we're going to make it." And so it gets worse. We get up, and the pilot says, "We're going to try to get up higher than this mess." And so as we're getting higher than this mess, this actually happened. I didn't know this could happen, and you could survive this until it happened. But I'm looking out the window, and a lightning bolt hits the wing of the airplane. And I just happen to see it. So I'm going, and I look at her like, things get worse. We're flying, and I didn't know this could happen either, but all of a sudden, we just start falling. And the pilot told us later, we fell 5,000 feet. We hit an air bubble or something like that. And when we're falling, this happened. We're falling, and I hear a kid in the back go, "We're gonna die!" So at that point, I just look at the lady, I go, "You're on your own." But I'm trying to be hopeful to this woman, and I'm not even sure that I have hope. Until, by the way, the other thing that happened was the weather got bad on the East Coast, and they diverted the flight, and of all places, they're sending us down to Houston, Texas. And so we're going across Houston, Texas, and I finally see the city lights, the bright city lights. I don't think Houston is on a hill, but I could see the bright city lights, and I thought, you know what, I think we're going to be okay here. We're going to make it. I can see the bright lights of that city. And sometimes we are those bright lights of hope for those people that God brought to our minds today. Our words and our actions are the only hope sometimes that those people have. Number 4, we need to act intentionally. We need to act intentionally. And this is where we decide whether or not this is just another sermon, just another bunch of notes we filled out, or we're going to actually try to do something here today. And I'll just spill the beans here. We've been talking about the Follow Me groups, and really that's our plan. We don't get anything for doing Follow Me groups. It's not some number we can count up or something we can check off on a box. It's just that's what we want to do to try to put this into practice, is have Follow Me groups. You never know what people are going through. We've talked about some great influencers today, Jesus, people like Plato and Aristotle and others. Have you ever heard of Becky Hunter? I didn't think so. I just met her a month ago. But here's the thing about Becky Hunter. My wife, Cindy, she moved around a lot when she was growing up. She moved 25 times before she was 20 years old. And so if you've ever made any of those moves when you're in grade school, when you're in middle school, when you're in high school, it's hard to do that. You're the new kid, and it's hard to make friends. And then once you finally make a friend, you move somewhere else, and then you got to do it all over again. And one of her moves in middle school, I think she said she was 13 years old. She moved to a new school, and she's facing all that awkwardness and difficulty. But on day 1 of school, Becky Hunter comes up to her and she says, "Hey, you're new. I want to be your friend, and I want to introduce you to other people." And she introduces them to other friends. And so my wife, Cindy, was able to have some friendships and some relationships, and she had a really, really good year socially at the school for as long as she was there. I don't even think she finished out that school year, and she moved again. She moved, and she didn't see Becky Hunter again until fast forward 20-something years later. Social media is invented, and they find each other on Facebook, and Cindy sends the message to Becky Hunter, and she says, "I just want to say thank you for being a friend and being an influence in my life back then. You didn't know this, but I was going through a super tough time. My parents were divorcing. My whole world was turning upside down. It wasn't one of those nice, neat, clean little divorces, if there is such a thing. It was a hard divorce, a messy divorce. And Cindy was struggling emotionally. And Becky Hunter never knew that, but she was willing to be an influence and a positive influence on Cindy's life. These Follow Me groups are designed to be roundtable discussions where you look at a video, you discuss John Maxwell success principles in a biblical context. You talk at some point about how to have a relationship with Christ. And they're a way for us to try to put this stuff into practice. I know you're thinking, well, I don't know if I can lead one of those. I just don't feel like I've got the skills or I'm the right person. I understand how you feel. I feel that way too. I found this thing I wanted to read for you this morning, and it talks about the people that Jesus picked to be his managers if we were in a business situation here. His team. And imagine if Jesus hired a management consulting firm to analyze the prospective employees that he was going to hire, these disciples. And imagine that this management team sends this letter back to Jesus, and here's what they say. "Dear sir, thank you for submitting the resumes of the 12 men you have picked up for managerial positions in your new organization. All of them have now taken our battery of tests, and we have not only run the results through our computer, but also arranged personal interviews for each of them with our psychologists and vocational aptitude consultants. The profiles of all tests are included, and you will want to study each of them carefully. As part of our service, we make some general comments for your guidance, much as an auditor will include some general statements. This is given as a result of staff consultation and comes without any additional fee. It is the staff opinion that most of your nominees are lacking in background, educational, and vocational aptitude for the type of enterprise you are undertaking. They do not have the team concept. We would recommend that you continue your search for persons of experience in managerial ability and proven capability. Simon Peter is emotionally unstable and given to fits of temper. Andrew has absolutely no qualities of leadership. The two brothers, James and John, the sons of Zebedee, place personal interests above company loyalty. Thomas demonstrates a questioning attitude that would tend to undermine morale. We feel that it is our duty to tell you that Matthew has been blacklisted by the Greater Jerusalem Better Business Bureau. James, the son of Alphaeus, definitely has radical leanings. They've registered as a high score on the manic-depressive scale. One of the candidates, however, shows great potential. He's a man of ability and resourcefulness, meets people well, has a keen business mind, and has contacts in high places. He's highly motivated, ambitious, and responsible. We recommend Judas Iscariot as your controller and right-hand man. All of the other profiles are self-explanatory. Sometimes the people that we would pick to do the job are not the people God would pick at all. And so today, I just want to ask you to consider doing one of these Follow Me groups. I'm not even going to ask you to make a commitment to that today, but I would ask you to consider committing to going to one of the trainings and finding out more about it. We have one tonight at 6 o'clock. We have one Wednesday at 6:30, next Sunday at 6 o'clock, the following Wednesday at 6:30. You can find out what they're all about. And I just want to challenge you and ask you to consider doing that. I know it's out of your comfort zone. I know it requires some effort on your part. But it's a way we can put this stuff into practice. And I believe that some amazing things can happen from this and that we'll have stories to tell afterwards about how we were able to influence people to know God. I also want to ask as we close out today that we just take a moment to meditate and pray now for those people that God brought to mind. And we're going to have the band lead us in a song. You can just sit and reflect and pray for those people that you know God has put in your life, that He wants you to influence to know Him. Also use the time to just ask God if He's leading you to be a part of a Follow Me group or even another group that's offered here at our church. So I'm going to lead us in prayer, and then we're just going to be quiet, listen to a song, and use this time to pray for those people that God has put in our lives to influence. Father, thank you so much for your love for us. Thank you that even though we fall way short of your glory, you love us. You give us an opportunity to be in relationship with you, to serve you, and to influence others for your kingdom. And Father, I just ask that you'd help us now, that you'd guide us and lead us with your Spirit as we take a moment to pray for those that you've put in our lives who need to be influenced to know you.